Welcome to T.S.O.B with Dr. G, a podcast featuring intellectual table talk about race and sexuality. I'm your host, Dr. Tracy Q. Gilbert, a sexuality educator, writer, and researcher. Join me as I talk with the most brilliant minds in human sexuality, applying a professional Black lens to discussions about sexiness, health, and healing in the new millennium. It's T.S.O.B, the sex ed of Black folk. Let's get to the get down, shall we? All right, y'all. Welcome to another episode of T.S.O.B with Dr. G, aka the sex ed of Black folk. I am so glad to be in front of y'all another week and just to bring another episode. I love what I do, and I just love being able to have conversations with amazing people, and today's person is no exception. I'll tell the story of how she ended up on the show in a second, but let me introduce you all to newly minted Dr. Clarissa Serenity Francis. I'm going to read her bio real quick, tell you how she ended up on this show, and how I feel like this is going to be a phenomenal conversation. So Clarissa Serenity Francis, aka the Real Hot Girl Doc, is a Black sexual liberation scholar and AASECT certified sexuality educator who focuses on Black women's sexual liberation and pleasure. Dr. Francis has collaborated with colleges, organizations, and community groundbreakers to bring awareness and healing to Black women and youth. She received her bachelor's degree in Africana Studies, which, hey, I was an Africana Studies major for like one semester. We'll talk about that. And a minor in psychology from Bowling Green State University. At BGSU, she held leadership roles in multicultural organizations and eventually became a health peer educator. She also was at Clark Atlanta University in the Africana Women's Studies program there and got her master's degree with a concentration in Black women's sexuality and sexual health peer education. And then in just this year, she earned her PhD in Human Sexuality at the California Institute of Integral Studies. Her dissertation focused on the social history of pleasure activism in Atlanta, Georgia. So shouts out to the ATL for holding it down. Serenity feels called to develop safe spaces for Black women to participate in unrestricted dialogue, unpacking and celebrating their bodies and diverse sexualities. She has over 10 years as a sexuality educator and is also trained in massage therapy, Reiki healing, and conscious erotic touch. My goodness. Oh, that all just sounds like it feels good. She currently sits on the AASECT's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and the Leadership Collective of the Women of Color Sexual Health Network, which is how we actually got connected. So amen for that. And she also developed, which we're going to definitely talk about today, the Let Freedom C.U.M Sexuality Workshop Series to equip Black sexuality professionals and the aspiring sexually liberated in recognizing and utilizing multidisciplinary approaches to pleasure activism as a tool for Black sexual liberation. Dr. Francis's goal is to infiltrate multi-oppressive systems to secure safe spaces for Black women to unpack intergenerational trauma, reclaim body autonomy, and say yes to their own serenity. And so y'all heard that last line. You know this is a woman after my own heart. So I'm excited about this conversation. I just want to real quickly, again, just before welcoming her to speak, I just want to say how we kind of got connected. Like I said, we serve on the Leadership Collective together for Women of Color Sexual Health Network. And I was talking about the podcast and how I was pulling together episodes. And Dr. Francis was just like, I want to be on. And at first I was like, well, I got my episodes worked out. What you mean? You gonna be on? Okay. Yeah, cool, whatever. And I looked at my schedule and there was this one opening that was just like, obviously this is perfect. And so she's just finding this out in the moment, but this is officially our Juneteenth episode. So this is the episode that will be airing the week of Juneteenth. And so we are really going to get into freedom today and talking about that. There's no one other that person that makes sense to have during this conversation right now. So with all of that, welcome to T.S.O.B, Serenity. Thank you so much for being here with me today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm cool. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. This is,
Yes.
I mean, it's, morning time is, it's not naturally my my uptime, but I'm really excited.
Yes. And I'll try to keep this as painless as possible.
Cool.
All right, so we're not going to waste any more time because I know you want to get about your day and you're already doing amazing things that we're going to talk about in a second. But first, let's start with my questions that I ask all of my guests to get your feet wet in the conversation. Tell me where you're from, where your people are from, and what's got you thinking about sex and sexuality these days.
Okay. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. I
Hey, shouts
now
out to the Midwest.
yes. It's my family is from my mother's side is from Cleveland by way of Georgia, Columbus, Georgia, and my father was from Jamaica, so I'm Jamaican also.
Wow.
And yeah, I've been in Atlanta for 11 years, going on 11 years this summer. And the the question was, how did I get
What's
to
got you
sexuality?
thinking about sex and sexuality these days?
These days, like where I am right now with sexuality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so as you mentioned, transitioning from my program. So right now, I'm doing more work outside of academics, but still related because that's there. But with Let Freedom Come, the series was something that really combined all my worlds. As you mentioned in my bio, my colorful um, background. It really is combining all my worlds of being a practitioner, being a educator, a researcher,
Yeah.
and me. So really just connecting with like-minded people or those who may not, like-minded, but in the industry, in the field, and those who just have an interest, general interest, and just getting out here in these streets and continuing to educate. And I feel like a cheerleader, a sexual liberation, as to support people and offer resources, for their journey.
Amen. Amen, amen, amen. And yes, we'll definitely get into what specifically that means. Like I know when I saw that title when you first dropped that, I think a couple months ago, I was like, okay, kick the door in, why don't you? Okay, we're gonna really get into this. And particularly again, a woman after my own heart, you talk about things in a way that feels like we may be on the same wavelength in terms of what we're thinking about needs to happen in the way of the work. And so I'm looking forward to getting into all of that. But before we get into all of that, how did your dad get from Jamaica to Ohio? That's what actually popped in my head when you were talking. That's so interesting to me.
There's actually like a population. So, I mean, the Midwest, but specifically Cleveland, is pretty diverse. So, with different type of ethnicities and cultures, like we have little like areas of Italy. We have areas where there's a high Puerto Rican
Mm-hmm.
population, but the island people they there usually
Okay.
so I can't remember who came first to the states from my father and his siblings, and then my grandmother. So I had a lot of family, on that side in Cleveland, and so somehow, because usually places are like New York and Florida where
Mm-hmm.
they have family. Usually they go wherever they have family. And so
Right.
they just, I don't know how they ended up in Cleveland, but
Yeah. That like that's the thing that is like that really drew me because I was like, yeah, we definitely have that story. Like I talk about my journey with my family coming from Tennessee going up to Wisconsin, and yeah, they went where family was. But usually
mhm.
when you hear folks coming from like the Caribbean or from the islands, they go to, like you said, New York, or they go to Miami, or they go to like
Mhm.
the international places. So that was just really like, oh, Cleveland.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jamaica's there.
But wherever the
It,
opportunities are, that's where you're going. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because they used to, it's for, like an industrial place. So
yep.
not knowing specifically, but I imagine, being able to find work, probably
Oh,
being able to find
absolutely.
work there,
Absolutely. Yeah, I have
but
family in Illyria. So
okay.
I had a lot of family right in the Illyria that were there when, at the height of all the different plants, and some have
Mm.
passed on, but I do have a couple of relatives that still live there. So I'm familiar. That's just,
Oh,
that Jamaica
cool.
was a twist. But tell me, Dr. Francis, tell me how you got from Cleveland to growing up in Cleveland with your family to sex ed. Like, what was that journey like for you?
Um, an interesting one. I didn't imagine that I would be here. But funny thing is, nobody's surprised that I'm here. So I'll say always being a curious person,
Mm.
inquisitive. I had questions about everything. So I was a preacher's kid. So
Mm.
by way of my stepdad, 'cause my father had passed young when I was young, and so I was primarily raised by my stepdad and my mom, and
Okay.
he's a pastor and a preacher, throughout my younger years. And so a lot of, in the black church, there's little to no talk about sex. And when it's brought up, it's in a negative way. Everything's bad. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to hell. If you, if you sex before marriage, pregnancy, outside of marriage, sex, masturbation, anything that brings you pleasure, don't do it. And
Mm-hmm.
specifically with women and girls,
Mm-hmm.
it's even more restrictions. And so being an Aquarius, the little rebel that I am, and being, inquisitive. So I had questions. Things didn't make sense. I just didn't believe that, these things could be, a sin or something wrong. You just damn to hell if you
Mm-hmm.
experience any pleasure. But
Mm-hmm.
so I think the lack of information was one thing, because when I started my cycle, I was given, I think the Christmas after, I was given, or Christmas or birthday, after I was given the book, How the Body Works. And
Mm.
I was so fascinated by what happens, because I'm like, I remember my grandmother telling me, you can't be messing with those little boys now. And I'm just like, why? I was like, not as if I was messing with them, because I'm thinking, like, we be like playing around the playground, like hitting each other and stuff. Like, it's like elementary. I was young when I started my cycle. So I'm like, what is she talking about? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
does she
Mm-hmm.
mean? I'm not. It's like, oh no, I can't be messing with these little boys. And so I did research. Like, I studied the pages of of the reproductive system in that book. And I was
Mm.
just so amazed. I was like, wow. I was like, this is what can happen. A whole person, a being. And I was just
Right.
so fascinated. And then fast forward to, hearing different things. Like, I started hearing about people, having sex like around me, and like pregnancies in middle school, abortions. I heard about abortions for the first time. All of this
Mm-hmm.
going on before I've really had any personal experiences, I'll say. And so then by the time I got to high school, I'm even more curious. And I'm just like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if it was more for the research or if I was just at the point when my hormones was like, okay, we
Uh-huh.
waited long
Uh-huh.
enough. It's like, this
Yeah.
is the. It was funny because I'll just remember this. I think of the summer. I was like, no, this is it. This is the summer. This is when, like, because people closer to me started, like, having sexual experiences, and I'm just like, I want to do it. Like,
I love the logic. I love the logic. It feels resonant to me that you
yeah.
sat and you thought about it and you were like, yeah. So what can happen? I think I want to do this. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm ready now. The time has come. And I think part of it was research. It was like, I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
see what
yeah.
this is about. And
Yeah.
my experiences and people around me, of course, it was that lack of information. All we had was like the free clinic that we can
Mm-hmm.
go to if something came up or didn't come up. I was the supporter. Like, if I had to take somebody down to the clinic or information, somehow I was getting access to condoms. So I was, I think
Mm-hmm.
partially once, I know definitely my older brother was a source. I was definitely stealing condoms from him, giving them to other, to my people, and
You're the
for my
redistributor.
so I was pushing condoms at a young age. But and so just as I was researching different things, or as they was telling me things, I was like, oh, let me look this up, and this
Mm-hmm.
was Google out? I can't remember where Google was then. I think it was newer if it was. But I was a really like a reader. Like, I love, books, reading. So I would research. I would get all the books about health and all these different
Mm-hmm.
things. It's like, I'm gonna be an expert because I'm, Clarissa explains it all.
Yes, yes, literally in the flesh.
And it's like, right, the real Clarissa explains stuff. But so it just started that way, where just naturally being an educator, like,
Yeah.
researcher and educator, to the point where I became a health educator, like I said, in undergrad. And I was also interested in mental wellness, mental
Mm-hmm.
health, stress management. But I started learning more about HIV, AIDS, and I felt some type of way. I was at a predominantly white institution, and
Mm-hmm.
I was only like maybe one other black healthcare educator, and
Mm.
so it just didn't sit right with me when we had the conversations about HIV/AIDS or STIs. Of course, African Americans, disproportionate rates, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I just didn't want to have the other educators who were not of color, going to the Greek organizations or the BSU or just different whoever was requesting, being the one saying, oh, basically like y'all are, have the higher rates and
Mm-hmm.
y'all, like, I just felt like that's what I translated it to.
Yeah, yeah.
When I speak, it's like we have these disproportionate rates, and this, and speaking about it in a way where it was very scripted, there,
Mm-hmm.
of what we had to talk about, and but I would, kind of like I would adjust it, a bit and make it interesting, because I remember the little limited information we received around sex and
Mm-hmm.
reproductive systems, because I was like so fascinated, so I was excited, and to just have this, and then I think maybe it was a week of talking about it, a day, I can't remember, at different times, and I'm just like left with like, this is all we get. I was like, I know more than
Right.
this. I was like, I could have
This
taught
ain't
this.
giving what we're supposed to have gave. What's
Yeah, like
happening?
in high school, I'm just like, I could have taught this class. It's like,
Right.
and so, um, so still a lot of people came with that, I seen in college. And I just wanted to find a way to make it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want it to be like, oh, come off as preachy or judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
Really just, that's when I really realized, the value of having a resource and it being somebody who, a peer, telling you, versus being a parent or a
Mm-hmm.
guardian or a medical professional, and so still treating it as something on the side, because I majored in Africana Studies. I originally
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be a psychologist or psychiatrist. And who was it? So when I got to Clark, well, one, I needed a job. Like, I needed to work somewhere while I
That's
was a grad
always
student.
a
So,
motivation.
so I professionally stalked this lady at the health center, Carla Scipio, and actually this is a program. This is how I know Trina. I met
Oh,
Trina
okay.
when I was
Yes.
at Clark. It was a grant with Advocates for Youth, and that was able to fund my grad assistantship. So I
Yeah.
worked with the health center, and I really got deeper into sexuality education and wellness. But I was able to do it in a different way. One, probably because being at a HBCU, and specifically, you just, at the time, there wasn't much, I'll say there wasn't much policies or structure in place. Like, there wasn't really much that was in place as it related to sexuality education and even wellness
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And so, I had a lot of flexibility and freedom. And even though college, she would say, like, she was like, please don't get me fired. Because I was like, because I'm like, oh, we need to talk about this. I was like, no, like, vaginas, let's see, like,
Yeah, right.
they need to know. It's like, it's like, y'all talking about, these are what's coming up,
Mm-hmm.
the issues that's coming up. So I was like, why not talk about, have an event, talking about whatever it is. And I would have these different, like, creative ways to, to sound attractive or sexy or fun, as
Yes.
at least to, interest, and then it started transitioning into not just being something I do on the side, to being something that obviously is my calling.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that's when I decided, when I finally made it out of Clark, um, academically,
Mm-hmm.
and that's in between, my break was going into massage school, but
Mm.
because I needed a whole break, and then I was like, I'm just study if I'm gonna get a PhD because I knew I was gonna be a doctor or something back in like high school.
Yeah.
I was like, why not human sexuality? Because I was introduced to it at a conference. I think I can't remember what conference it was, but the program was newer at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
so I ended up delaying my when I started a couple years and got into it, and so
Yeah.
that's how I got here. Really, the lack of information, that shame that usually comes around with sex, and the
Yeah.
limited and negative messages around, and I realized the effect it had on me. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to offer something different. Like, I
Yeah.
really believe in the being who you needed when you was younger.
Yes. Yes. So many things that you saying I just resonate with, and I'm just like, yep. Mm-hmm. That part. That part. One thing in particular that you talked about that I'm like resonating with is the whole experience of being at an HBCU, and I do feel like some things have changed. Shouts out to folks. Well, first off,
Hmm.
let me rewind and say shouts out to Trina Scott. We mentioned Trina. Let me
Yes.
for the folks who are like, who is Trina? We not talking about the rapper, even though she is dope. We're talking about Trina
Mhm.
Scott, who is a co-foundress of Women of Color Sexual Health Network. So blessings to Trina if she's listening. Um,
Yeah.
but also just going back to the idea of being at an HBCU. And I think a lot has changed since I was at an HBCU. I graduated from undergrad at Tennessee State University in like 2000. And so I know a lot has changed since then. But at the same time, I know a lot of the culture is still the same around sexuality, right? This idea of like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you don't talk about it. If we are talking about it, maybe we're talking about soul ties, or, it's
Hmm.
just funneled through a very limited, I would even say in some cases, anti-Black lens. Um,
Hmm.
so share more with the folks kind of how you felt like you were able to still maintain your understanding and your awareness of yourself as a sexual health educator while being let me not even impose on you what it was like. Tell folks what it was like, your HBCU experience, and then if that's resonant for you, that it was a little bit more maybe constricted, how you were able to evolve and like come into your own as an educator in that environment.
Yes, because it was an experience. So,
Yes.
so
Oh, and and before you but I also want to shout out Tanya Bass, who holds it down at
yes,
North Carolina Central University as well. So we recognize there are folks at HBCUs doing their thing in sex ed, and we also know there's a
yes,
lot left to grow in that area. So yes,
yes.
please continue.
Whew, let's see. So I'll just say, working in the AUC. Um, so I worked with different. I collaborated primarily with Clark, and then with Morehouse School of Medicine and Morehouse, and kind of sometimes with Spelman. But I'll just say in general, in different schools, each school had their own culture, and different, the levels of it. And I'll just say there was definitely I had to defend. We had to defend everything,
Mm,
basically when it came to sexuality or anything that's outside of talking about HIV/AIDS awareness. Like if we
mm-hmm.
was not just specifically talking about basically don't do this, you can't have, or whatever, talking about the consequences and like shaking
Mm-hmm.
that, finger, like,
Right.
at the students. And it's just like, well, that's not what I'm here for. That's just not what I do. It's like I
Right.
can provide the information in a way, where because I'm a resource. It's like I'm not telling you what to do, you know. But I at least want you to have the information, the resources that you need
Yeah.
here. Oh, you say you don't use condoms or you don't need condoms. Well, here goes some, and here's some alternatives. Like there's a female or internal condom here for you, and and here's some lube. I highly recommend it. Here's
Right.
my experience and how I got it. Became a adamant user of lube, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so maybe you could use it too, whatever. But at the administration level, and I think it was a mixture of things. But I'll just say that most the HBCUs are religious based, institutions,
Mm-hmm.
and we already have like in our culture, like the Black communities, it's like sex is not something we talk about.
Right.
It's not something we're comfortable talking about. It's a stigma around it, especially when our religion, is in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we haven't had a lot of spaces and opportunities before, to be religious or Christian, whatever you identify as, and talk about sex and talk about not
Right.
just the negative things, talking about pleasure. Even if we're saying sex is supposed to be for married, people, where's the conversations about pleasure, and sex
Mm-hmm.
for the married people? If this is
Right.
what you're saying, like that's how I
Right.
felt. And it's like, I just don't want us to enjoy it.
We can't enjoy it because then that would fulfill the savage stereotype and all the other
Yeah.
things that are said.
and so,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so we would have to find ways to kind of like finesse to have these conversations. Like, yeah, we're talking about this topic, yeah, that, whatever, it's HIV/AIDS Awareness Month. But I get in there, we're in the dorms or the halls, and the different little small, most of them were pretty intimate. And it's like, let me tell you, it's like, let me tell you what's really going
Lean
on. Let me
close. I
give you
got a
some
secret.
information from my experience, from what I hear,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, I felt like sometimes I really feel like the sexuality Harriet Tubman. Like, I feel like,
I love
like
that.
liberating us, and it's like have to do it on the low, and it's not because of the white man,
Right.
whatever. It's us,
Yeah.
like
Well,
having a
and I appreciate you saying that. Although I do also try to clarify that from my
hmm
experience and my assessment of it, that it's not because of the white man, but it is very
hmm
much because of that
yeah,
psychological indoctrination, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it is very
definitely,
much because of white thoughts
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
whiteness that has permeated our minds so much that we perpetuate it so easily in our own communities. Stuff that's just like, y'all do realize they not paying attention to us like that no more.
Okay,
Like
and no,
you do
thank you
realize like we free,
for
right?
right.
Like
Thank you for clarifying that, and that's exactly what I meant. That like
yeah.
in our face today, like directly,
Yes.
it's no, it's like it's the older women that's judging me or shaming me or keep
Right.
repressing me. It's my partner, my black
Yeah.
male partner that's
Yeah. And
oppressing
I
me.
think
You know.
and I think that right. And I think HBCUs, for all of their like I'm definitely one of those that's like I'm gonna talk about my mama, but you can't talk about my mama. So
Yeah.
let me be clear that this is not to drag HBCUs because I think it's
No.
also
Yeah.
important to stress that a lot of that I think is also kind of paternalistic thinking, right? Thinking about the fact that for many young black folks that go to HBCUs, like the whole vibe is essentially, well, at least my experience was,
Mhm.
we are stepping in as parents for the parents
Yes.
that trust us with their children. And so,
Yeah.
I remember being, and I was 16, so I was even more like, oh, you a real baby coming on campus. And I think there was definitely
hmm
just this vibe that your teachers were your teachers, but they weren't just your teachers. They were like aunties and they were like
hmm
mentors and they had a vested interest in your safety. And so I think that
hmm
also added to the sense of like, no, I can't be letting you out here doing whatever and
Yeah. Yeah.
equipping you, giving you condoms. Like no, your mama trusted me to make sure you stay out of trouble. And so I think for better or worse, that also plays a part in not allowing the natural and normative sexual development that's happening to continue to grow in an incubate, in a really a life affirming space.
hmm
So I think that's just important to clarify too.
No, yeah, no, definitely. It was definitely, it was an amazing experience. I wanted that experience in multiple ways, but it was, it
And
just
yeah, it's a both and.
strengthened. I'll say it definitely contributed to my growth as a professional, as a
Yeah.
researcher, because I needed to make sure I had the facts and
Yeah,
not
yeah.
even just, because much of my work, although it was Africana Women Studies, most of my work was around sexuality. So they knew
Mm,
like if we had a topic, if we had an assignment, it's gonna be around sexuality and most likely
yes.
Black women and sexuality or
Can I just
something.
tell you, I love that as well. Like we could do a whole other conversation that's just about Africana studies and the reluctance in
Mm.
Africana studies to deal with sex and sexuality. But we're not gonna do that in this particular conversation. But you and I need to chop it up on an intellectual
Yeah,
nerdy girl level about that specific phenomena because that is
yeah,
also a
yeah. It is
thing.
definitely.
but
I just feel like.
Since you were talking about kind of the ways that you were able to kind of infiltrate spaces and just kind of have the conversations that are relevant to folks, that leads me to my next question in terms of thinking about you and your specialty or your superpower. If someone were to ask you that, what would you say your sex ed superpower is or your specialty?
I would say professionally, I would say my
Right.
superpower is um is I have the ability to really create safe spaces. Like I feel like I am a safe
Mm.
space for people, and specifically Black people in general. Because even I've had conversations with all identities, gender
Mm-hmm.
identities of Black folks, who I can tell were used to being judged or shamed, or misunderstood or not listened to, when they're talking about their sexuality, their beliefs, their background, even if it's something different than mine, so allowing that space for just to hear, because I'm a historian. I love hearing stories, learning, and not trying to rewrite people's narrative. It's, of hearing. So I noticed that people feel very comfortable, speaking to me. People I just meet. Sometimes it's, not necessarily always
They just open up.
not always in the space to receive, or no, I'll be like, okay, so that, and making them feel comfortable about expressing themselves, and even I'll say, even personally, I'll say, of even with partners or friends, I'm gonna challenge you in a way that feels good. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, I
yeah,
didn't even
yeah.
know that I could be, have this life or be a part of this life, so yeah, being an open-minded and free spirit that I am,
Yeah.
that really transfers to my work professionally. You know.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. I love that. And so tell us, what does freedom mean to you? And how does sex feed into that notion of freedom for you?
So for me, freedom, as I mentioned, being the rebel that I am, being able to do whatever you want,
Mm.
whatever that might be, not having to ask permission.
Mhm.
You are the one to give yourself permission, and without limitations. And so what that looks like sexually, with sexuality, is, for us, Black bodies. We
Mhm.
are our history. We've had so much, so, centuries of not being able to control, what happens to our bodies, in general, and sexually, being
Mhm.
used, as cattle, as so objectification, abuse, trauma, assault was normalized. This was just what happens.
Right.
And so for me, I think we have done, a good job of focusing on liberating ourselves physically, economically, and moving into mentally, and emotionally. And there's still more work when it comes to this
Yeah.
sexually, and with our bodies, of actually reclaiming that power of, as you mentioned something when we're talking about the schools, of when we were saying, they're not even paying attention. Like when we think of our oppressors, who typically for us are white,
Yeah,
our
yeah,
white
yeah.
oppressors, is something we still have, that when we speak about, respectability politics,
Mhm.
and we are holding on to this, we have to carry ourselves in a certain way to be
Mhm.
respected,
Mhm.
and not just with others, but with each other. And we
Yeah.
judge each other, we shame each other. And so this freedom of not caring, unapologetically expressing whoever it is you are, and
Yeah.
giving yourself permission, and having that ownership,
Yeah.
of your body, your sexuality. And that's, how whatever, but that's what it means for me, and even in my personal journey. And it's something that, I consider in my work. It's something
Yeah.
that I want for others. It's like, a friend, sister friend of mine, Dr. Michelle. She does work on ratchet womanism, and I remember her
Mm.
her saying that everybody don't want to be free, and that's
Facts.
real. In so many levels, in so many ways, some people don't know that they're not, allowing themselves to be free. And
Yeah.
then some just, it's like, no, I'll stay here. I was
Yeah.
like, all right, just like thinking about when I imagine like with Harriet Tubman, it's like, they said, I don't know if it was actually proven that she said it, but I imagine she said she could have freed a lot more, if
Right.
if they wanted to, or if they realized that they were,
Yeah.
enslaved. And so, and that's what freedom and how it relates to sexuality for me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think what I'm sitting with, you move right into what would have normally been my next question. I think when I ask folks, kind of where do you feel like is opportunity for Black folks to grow and learn, and or even some places where we get wrong. And I think
Mm-hmm.
everything you said about like just not embodying or not acknowledging or not even recognizing that we're still so restricted, like we still restrict ourselves. And one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that's coming up for me, so I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about it too, is that even in my experience or my estimation, even from a professional and personal level, that it's one thing when you are blocking your own journey, when you're like, you know what, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
interested, that's, I don't care, I don't want to open that part of myself. But it's another
Mm-hmm.
thing when you then start to police and regulate other people in the community. So then, you're passing off and you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, well, this group can't be doing this because of blah blah blah, and y'all over
Yeah.
here are this because you doing this, that, and the third. And so I'm curious your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts about that, about is there a difference between the self censorship that goes on and the community censorship? Can a boundary be drawn, or do you feel like they're related at all? And in what ways do you see that showing up in our community?
Definitely, I feel it's related. It's something that's conditioned in us, has been generationally, conditioned in us, in the community. So, of course, we internalize it individually,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I recognize it in myself,
Mm-hmm.
as free as I thought I was, and open minded and free spirit. Like, yeah, like, it was at different stages of my journey, even then, especially coming into the program, Human Sexuality, and then also with training at Conscious Erotic Touch with Amina and the Institute in Atlanta.
Yes, shouts out to Mina Butterfly.
Aquarius sis. Um, but checking my own stuff. So I realized it was some things that I was still holding on to that was not of me. It was messages I received growing up, of
Mm,
being told for so long, like, no sex before marriage. And not even so long, just something that was just, I just knew this was just the expectation that
mm-hmm.
sex was bad. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't be just having sex because I want to.
Right.
Whatever it should be because want to reproduce, or I'm with, a partner with my husband,
Right.
and
Right.
rose eyes for the people who
Right.
can't see me. But, and so, I had to get to a place where I had to give myself permission. I
Mm,
realized, with the different therapies and different experiences I had, um, like I had to be who, be the change that I wanted to see,
yeah.
in the world. It's like practicing what I preach. Because growing up in the church, I seen a whole lot of,
Oh yeah.
people, not practicing what you saying up there. It's like
Right.
I was heavy in like when I was a preacher at a certain point. I had sipped the Kool Aid, and
Same.
in a way, I had sipped the sexual shame Kool Aid, and I remember signing this promise, ring or something, contract or whatever, that I was going to save it to marriage, and I really
Mm,
felt that way up until middle
mm-hmm.
school. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna save it to marriage because that's
Mm-hmm.
just how it's supposed to be. And
Mm-hmm.
then something switched where it was just like, no, no, I'm okay. Like, that's
No, I'm
what you
good.
choose. And so it was my own journey, really informed a lot. And then when started having more conversations, because I was very private, and because I felt shame, I felt like something was wrong with me because I wanted to explore so much and I was so
Yeah.
open and felt like this freak, whatever. When freak was not a good thing, I'll say. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And And when I started seeing that in others, like that really motivated me to keep going, because somebody just asked me, like, how did I find the bravery or the audacity to do the work that I do? And I said, it's a daily challenge and struggle. You
Absolutely.
know, I just got to the point all these years. I said all these years I've been in this work. I just got to the point where I could openly discuss my work, and actually my family attended my dissertation. You know, where I'm talking about
Mm.
Black women's sexual liberation.
Yeah.
And I'm using, you know, it's the real hot girl movement. So I'm quoting Megan, you know, and then I'm quoting, you know, my interviewees who so eloquently express themselves, you know,
Yeah.
in the colorful ways, you know, of us Black femmes, you know, express ourselves. And I love it.
Right.
It was funny because I said all the words. I said all the words. All
Listen,
the key
same.
words.
There's a few
I
things that I was like, no,
said,
you need to understand that is
yeah,
part of blackness. You're getting the
okay.
color in these words.
Okay, and it was like my grandma was on there, like my grandma, my parents, and my uncle. It was so funny, and then it ended up being a whole discussion of how do you get into this work, and what you do now, what's your degree in?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Shouts out to the family members who have no idea what you do, but they love you anyway. They're like,
yeah,
she's smart. I don't know,
right.
but it's cool. That is beautiful. Okay, now let's bring it into Let Freedom Come. Like I don't want to give away all the secret sauce, cuz you know if y'all want that work, you got to pay for that work. But I would love for you to talk more with folks about, okay, so how did you get there in terms of developing that? What is it? Maybe what are some of the parts, and even just what the acronym is, because I know come is an acronym, right? Like,
It is.
yeah. Okay, so tell folks about Let Freedom Come, what that is.
Okay, Let Freedom Come. I'm trying to think where exactly when it started, when that came. But really, it's a combination of my hats, all my different experiences. Because
Mm-hmm.
at one time, I was operating under my different hats. Like I was a massage therapist, sex educator, and then I'm the student researcher. And so, as a massage therapist, I wasn't really bringing up that. Oh yeah, I'm a sex educator. Like I'm all about pleasure, orgasms, and you know, because
Yeah.
it's like this weird relationship as it relates to touch and you know, massage therapy of what, you know, with ethically, you know, and different things like that. So I didn't talk about it because sometimes it could get awkward anyway, because then it's like, oh, this isn't this type of session at that time.
Right. People
And
can get it
so
twisted. They can get it twisted.
yeah, so it's
Look,
like
we
it didn't,
free, but we not that free,
right,
damn
it's like
it.
it didn't come up then, because then I wasn't, this is pre being trained in conscious erotic touch or even knowing really that much about this world. So I operated as a massage therapist, and then as a sex educator, I didn't bring up too much about me being a massage therapist. And then, you know, I feel like as a researcher, I'm just like getting the information, like I'm reading and like getting the history, getting the experiences, and all of that. So I had all these different ways I was operating, and I had got to a point where I was just like, I could not continue to work in
Yeah.
this way. It was like, you know, because it was a point where I was Serenity in some spaces and I was Clarissa in other spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And often those people didn't know each other unless people were like who really knew me. Or whatever.
Right.
To when I think this happened, this might have happened around, I would say within the last few years. You know, it's getting to a place of I need to combine my worlds, you know, because it's related. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't yet clear to me of how what I did was related to each other, and really training with Amina and the conscious erotic certification, it made sense. It made sense that you know, my foundation is looking at the history of black folks, like looking at our
Yeah.
experiences, the trauma, but also the history, like you know, before, because we start African American history when we talk about black folks in America, we start with slavery. And
Right.
so there was something, I'll say, something in me, you know, just didn't believe like this is it, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm not accepting that this is all of our history. So it was
Right.
that part. And then always feeling, I guess I'm, you know, in a way, although this, you know, sometimes this comes off as a negative thing, as a people pleaser, but it's like I like to assist people in feeling good. You know, I like
Mm.
people to have
Mm-hmm.
pleasurable experiences. So if this is either professionally or personally,
Yeah.
and I was really adamant, as I mentioned, about stress management. And
Yeah.
when I learned, like my father passed young, 30, in his 30s, early 30s from a heart attack. And I've had a lot of, just different instances in my family, from health issues and with, high blood pressure, and realizing how much stress is related to a lot of, the issues that we have going on.
Absolutely.
And so when I received that work, like massage therapy, because I was stressed coming out of Clark and my grad program, and just at that time of my life, it was just a lot going on. And so I needed it personally. And so combining that where, so that was the healing piece, accessing that healing piece. So I have the history, the Black history, I have the healing, and then becoming a practitioner or more getting deeper into education, it was the application of this
Yeah.
information, And so eventually I got to a point where I started speaking about all of my worlds together. And Tantra and Conscious Erotic Touch was a way that I can, because it was Black centered, and specifically women,
Yeah.
centered in healing, speaking about sexual healing, realizing like that's a part of freedom, liberation, that healing is necessary. And so we Let Freedom Come, of course, immediately like playing off a Let Freedom ring.
Yes.
And so like I just really like acronyms. So it's like I think I came up with I just put the put it as an acronym before even knowing what the acronym stood.
Oh, got you.
But I made it make sense, and
Hmm.
so really it's that combination of coming to the center unapologetically, and to approach multi oppressions using multidisciplinary lens for Black
Hmm.
folks. And so that's also
Yeah.
me with Let Freedom Come. And
Yes.
so a goal for me is to just collaborate with all, because often those who are healing practitioners, or in tantra, conscious erotic touch, or sex workers, often sometimes may not collaborate or be in the same spaces as this historians, those who have
Hmm.
done that, like they have knowledge, definitely, but then also like there's just this disconnect, as if
Right.
we're working on towards liberation. It's
Right.
just you have your expertise and you have your area. You're providing the resources, or you offer that history. You get that background, and I'm doing this work right now. Like I'm doing the work.
Yeah.
I'm trying to assist them in their journey of unpacking all this stuff that some isn't even their own stuff. It's from
Yeah.
generations. And then those who are also just doing the work, like I have interviewed pleasure activists, and it was Black women, those who identified as Black women, pleasure activists who primarily focus on Black women's sexual liberation,
Hmm.
and their backgrounds were so diverse. I spoke with it was like nurse or medical professionals. One of my people they were a nail tech, um,
Wow. Yes.
doulas, um, sex toy, sellers, and just so it was a
Hmm.
range, of people. And it was just like, because this isn't just a, one lane, like a one specific
Right.
person or type of profession that can work
Right.
towards this liberation. So really for me, one, it is me, is my understanding of how I approach Black sexuality. It's like I have to consider and acknowledge the history, you know,
Right.
but I'm also like, we can't stay here,
Right.
with the history, with the negative, and what has happened to us. We have to get towards that pleasure, that healing, addressing that trauma, because it shows up. It shows up in our relationships. It shows up in the way we feel about our bodies, our
Yep.
sexuality and our sex, So yeah, and just so that
Yeah.
is my goal, is to, and then also,
Yes.
being encouraged, with Cameron with the sex ed. I guess we also connected
Yeah.
with
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. We
Cameron.
connected there. So shouts out to Cameron Glover.
Yes.
Yes.
So really encouraging me to figure out what it is, because I had to narrow my focus. Like that's my thing. I've been trying to do do everything, you know.
But sometimes when you have layers like that,
Yeah.
when you were saying that, I was like, I can resonate with all of this too. When you can do all the things, and you have to kind of, you living in a world where they're like, you got to pick one, and it's like, but
Yeah,
why? Why can't you
I
just
know
experience it all? But
that.
that's
Yeah.
capitalism, and we not, whatever. But
Hmm.
yeah, definitely everything you're saying, I'm like, yep. And what I love about it is that, to me, we recognize that humans are not one-dimensional people, right? Like, we have all of these different layers, right? And just like you
Hmm.
talk, the ways that we experience not only our sexuality, but our sexual trauma, our pleasure, all of those, we experience them on multiple levels. So we do it
Hmm.
in the body, and we do it in our brain, and we do it in our relationships, and we do it in our emotions, and all of those different
Hmm.
areas, right? The 8 channels of sexuality. Shouts out to
Yeah.
myself for coming up with that theory. But
Yeah.
we experience them all. And so the idea of sex ed, like, really, if you're going to meet the whole person, it has to be responsive to all of those different layers, and recognizing that you're not going to be able to touch one without hitting all of them at some point. So
Yeah.
I'm here for everything that you're talking about. Absolutely, absolutely. So you've mentioned it several times in this conversation, and I realized I didn't ask you to clarify. Can you clarify for people what conscious erotic touch is?
Okay.
What that whole thing is about?
Yeah. So conscious erotic touch is in the family. When we hear of tantra, it's just a
Mm.
the lens that Amina taught us, with conscious erotic touch. Basically, when we think of being informed, like when we talked about informed sex education, or informed, or trauma informed, where it's this understanding, of having, some a basis of the history, or experiences of, black, because it's primarily, it was black centered. So really, so it's around tantra. So really, it brings together the emotional, the spiritual, the physical, sexual, psychological. It brings around, all of that. Usually we separate it. Usually, as I mentioned in massage therapy, it's just strictly,
It's just the
thought
body.
as the body, and it could reduce stress, and that's about it. Of what,
Mm-hmm.
unless you take other continuing education, and where I was trained in Reiki or energy work, it's like it's just this. It's like it's
Yeah.
muscular, and just focusing on that physical. Whereas typically we don't get too much into spiritual, which is interesting because when a lot of what they use or what they come from is not an Asian, traditional,
Mm-hmm.
practices, and it's just like, the spiritual was definitely present, or
Mm-hmm.
existed, or so it's like it's interesting that it's removed, when we
Yeah.
addressing it, whereas when we're talking about healing and making someone feel better,
Yeah.
is almost just not as successful. I feel when you only focus on one area. When you focus on
Right.
the physical, like, okay, I'm gonna relieve these muscles, but I'm stressed. You stress, or you having some issues, whatever, in your relationship, or you got some trauma. It's like you're not even able to relax because you got these blockages or these experiences,
Absolutely.
or you have these different things going on right now in your life. Well, therapy matters. Like, therapy helps, but that's something that, just that we don't, um, as black people, or culture, like, we that's not something that we just broadcast as something that we need or are interested
Mm-hmm.
in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just really made sense of everything, of all of my work. Like, it was just like,
Yeah.
of with learning more about with the chakras as it relates to sexuality, and just touch. Like, I had, I think at that point I might have had already 5 years of being a massage therapist. So I had the techniques, like my techniques was down with, physical, but it was the intention that changed. The
Yes.
intention of, I actually can allow myself to, and the client, to assist in their journey, not just with this physical pain that you have going on, or even this stress that you have, but going deeper, into the
Yeah.
spiritual, and where you have these blockages and these disconnects,
Yes.
and where this trauma is being held, really assisting them in their journey. So if this really,
Yeah.
like, deepen a deepened
Yeah.
release.
Like a deep level. That's
Yeah.
exactly why I got excited, because I was saying what I felt like I heard you saying too was that, some of our traditional modalities, so like massage therapy, generally speaking, and like even therapy, like they may deal with symptoms, or they may deal with like kind of right there at the top level. But it sounds like
Hmm.
what you're talking about when you said intention, it's like, okay, we're going to get at what's underneath there. We're going to dig into the root and figure out
Hmm.
not just how to make whatever the physical manifestation of it is go away,
Hmm.
but like get under there so you can actually get to healing, and so you don't have any more symptomology. And so
Hmm.
that's what it sounds like to me when you're mentioning that. And now I'm like, oh, I want to, maybe Lord knows I don't need to pay for no more school, but I'm like, maybe I need to give me a conscientious touch. Let me
It's
learn about that.
amazing. No, it's amazing. If I haven't practiced that much of with conscious erotic touch, but it was just so, it was right on time. I'll say for my
Yeah.
journey and my healing,
Okay.
and took it so personal. It was just like, I'm gonna just, this is for me, It's like, and I'm gonna just
Listen,
let me work on
yes.
my stuff, because I was like, I still had some
Yes.
stuff I needed to work on, some old
Yes.
stuff and some new stuff. Because
Look,
like, if I'm trying to be out here liberating people, it's like I gotta make
it's
sure
a both and journey.
I'm,
Absolutely. I think you a preacher's kid, so as I minister to you, I minister to myself. Okay,
yes.
please know it, that it is a simultaneous process.
Okay.
All right, so I don't want to take too much more of your time because I know you got to get out of here, but I do want to ask, let's say somebody's listening and they're like, I am feeling this entire conversation. I'm loving what, Dr. Francis is putting down. I am trying
Hmm.
to get my serenity on, but I have no idea where to start. What would be some kind of baseline baby steps, or kind of, concrete things that you would suggest a person who, either for themselves or for the people in their lives, maybe a lover or their children, what is one thing that they can do to begin that journey of like accessing their sexual freedom?
Hmm. I would say the first step is to really sit with yourself, which is the most difficult.
Facts.
Is sitting with yourself, checking your baggage. Checking your whatever your trauma, the messages you received around sex, sexuality, your body. And sometimes we don't even realize it. Of what we still hold on to, like
Mm-hmm.
all the negative things that you may think or feel, or beliefs that you have around sex, sexuality, pleasure, orgasms. I would say address that, address that. So, in whatever way you need to, for some people, journaling, some therapy, I definitely highly recommend. That should just be included in our
Mm-hmm.
reparations package. Is,
Actual facts.
is
Actual
therapy.
facts.
It's like we all
Mm-hmm.
need it just default by default, and then on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, we have different experiences and just existing. Just so
Right.
therapy, finding a way to express yourself. Some people are creators. Some people write, some people draw, or even just being in the outdoors, doing whatever it is you need to do for you to get in that
Mm-hmm.
space. And finding some therapy, some type of therapy, whether it's sex therapy, finding a mental health professional, sex work, in whatever way. And so along with, as you checking your stuff and acknowledging the messages, is to as you're on your journey, as you're checking these different things and realizing, and I always say this, they laugh, but that healing is very ghetto. Like, healing is very ghetto. It's not cute. It's not cute.
At
It's
all.
not fun.
It's not sexy.
It's
It's not
not right. It's
fun.
not sexy. It's not. It's like it. You want to. It's like, I get it. Why some people is like, no, I'm just stay in this.
I'm gonna just stay in this mess. Thank you.
Because that's too much. That's
Mm-hmm.
just too much. I'm not trying to do that. So you will. So it comes with, that's the warning, that is ghetto. And if you feel like you don't want to do it, you're probably doing it right. And if there's a right or wrong way, it's like you're on the right path. It's
Right,
like
right, right, right.
it's turning into different things, and spread it in some way to others. Pass it on as you're on your journey in some way, whether it's for your partner, your sister friends, your brother friends, your parents. I've heard interesting stories of, because I think the way that I've lived my life, or as I've gone in my journey, I can see something happening. I think even in my family, or with my parents, or with my mother, with conversations or that were never had or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
discussed, or in the family. And so not even always being, because okay, so how some people, once we get, access to some information or healing or therapy or something, go to that one therapy session, now we are the therapist, and so
Mm-hmm.
in a loving
Mm-hmm.
way, because it's like, hold on, you still in your journey.
Like,
But
hold on, right.
take,
Nobody's asking
don't
for
do,
you to switch.
still continue to focus on yourself.
Right. Mind your business.
Yes. He literally be saying what I'm about to say next. But yes, minding your business. But sharing with whoever you feel comfortable with of your experience, because many of us feel, as I felt when I said back in like high school, I felt like I was alone, in this journey,
Mm.
or felt that, it was weird, I was this freak, so
Mm-hmm.
you never know who you can, have an impact on,
Right.
encouraging their journey. So working on yourself continuously, always working on yourself, checking your stuff, your biases. That's something I had to do also. Your privilege, checking your privileges, and the way that you were brought up, how it affects, your being and beliefs, and pass it on. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I would say. Oh, and keep it an open mind. I love, open mind.
Yeah, I love that. Yep, open mind, so important. So I've got my rapid fire questions coming up in just a second, but before I do that, I would love for you to share with folks what you feel like. Just thinking about where we are as as humanity, right? In this
Hmm.
time where there's all this change that's going on, and just a lot of things that are shifting in our consciousness at large. What do you feel like your place is within that shift that's happening right now? And you could think about, I've been having folks think about either, your role, your significance, your legacy, your place, any of those things that feel resonant for you to answer. What do you feel like is resonant for you at this moment in time?
That's a great question. And I'll say that is something that I am answering. I'm continuing to answer as the more that I grow and in my journey. Is that something that I'm answering, and figuring out. But as of right now, I'm an educator. I'm naturally I'm a cheerleader. I wasn't a cheerleader officially back in
Mm-hmm.
school, but like a sexuality cheerleader. So I feel my place is to continue to provide in these spaces, for us, and making us not feel so bad about being sexual beings,
Yeah.
and accessing, this sexual liberation.
Mm-hmm.
That it isn't something that's so far from you, that you can't have for yourself. Like
Right.
I always say, like, when people say, "Oh, that must be nice," it's like it doesn't. It could be you. It is
Right.
nice.
It is
It could be
nice.
you too.
Right.
So that's where I'm finding myself getting to a place where encouraging people who are in this work, who are in sexuality work, being that support. I feel like I'm a bridge to the academia world and research. It's like I don't mind getting the facts or the information, the
Yeah.
terminology, the theories to back up the work that's being done.
Right.
To heal, to work towards this liberation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's right now my role.
Yeah. Woo, 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 woo. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. Rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. I have 5 sentence stems. I'm basically just going to start you off and you fill it with whatever comes to your mind. First thing comes to your mind. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. First one is sexiness is.
Freedom.
I mean, for real, for real. The sexiest thing about blackness and or black people is.
Mm. Ooh.
That thing that you're laughing at is what you're supposed to say. Whatever you holding back right now, go on and say it.
I don't even know how to put it in words. I was just like the essence of black people. I'm just thinking, We just are.
Period. That's it. My go-to for feeling sexy is
twerking.
Amen. Amen. Like, what? Look, you talking about the mind body disconnect and reconnect? Like, that is one gift that I need to reconnect, because twerking ain't. That ain't my ministry yet. I'm working on it.
Yes.
One day. Sexual freedom for Black folk is achieved when
we give ourselves permission.
Come on, Ro James. Last but not least, when I'm done being on this podcast, I will
eat and get something to eat.
Amen.
And I'm doing a presentation.
Yes. Say, food is sexy, and I know you have a presentation to get to. So, it has been a wonderful time speaking with you. I'm so happy that I got out of my own way and had you come on, and I'm so glad that you accepted the invitation. Tell the folks where they can find you on social media, anything that you want folks to know about you. Go ahead and shoot your shot now.
So the real hot girl doc on Instagram. You can find me sayyes2serenity.com. The Let Freedom C.U.M YouTube channel that will be starting this summer, and Real Hot Girl Doc comes from my work working on the Hot Girl Summer and Hot Girl Movement following the Megan Thee Stallion.
Yes. And we didn't even get to talk about the Hot Girl Movement.
I know, Hot Girl Movement. Yes. So that's what's coming next. You know, this is right on time. It's perfect. Juneteenth is right before leading to, you know, summer solstice. And so I definitely want to do some hot girl prep and, you know, assist my sisters, my sister hot girls this summer, you know, as we, especially we still in the pandemic, but coming from where we were last summer to where we are now, where we're a little more.
Folks are ready.
Yes.
the streets are calling their name. Yes. Yes.
Like, I'm definitely going to the streets. And so that'll be coming soon. Definitely I will release a Hot Girl Summer reading. You know, some of the books that, you know, are texts or resources I include in my research, and then some that I've just been collecting along the way to read myself. I haven't read everything, but I've been collecting all these years, and so we can, you know, I just want to share. And so, I think those are all the ways. Oh, you can book a consultation with me. So I offer with coaching and with workshops, and so look out for that.
All right. Amen. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening to this conversation. I know I got some gems, so I'm expecting that y'all will have some too. Definitely let us know, email the show, or just hit up Dr. Francis and get your life. So without further ado, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for listening, and talk to y'all next time. Bye. You've been listening to T.S.O.B. with Dr. G, produced by Dr. Tracy Q. Gilbert of Tembe and Aya. To keep up with all things T.S.O.B., follow us on social media at T.S.O.B. the podcast, which you can find on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. For past episodes of the show, visit tsobpodcast.com or subscribe to the show either on YouTube or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Now, don't forget that you've got homework for this episode. To find the downloadable worksheet for this or any other episode of the show, head on over again to tsobpodcast.com, where you'll find it and any other important information from the show notes. And finally, do you have any questions or thoughts to share? Sound off by email at mailbox@tsobpodcast.com. Again, this was T.S.O.B., the sex ed of Black folk. Thank you for listening. Talk again soon.